All right. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the July meeting for PDA-Michigan, Progressive Democrats of America. I'm quickly going to go over the mission statement. We live in a great state, whether you're a Yooper or a Lower Peninsula resident, rural or urban. We're all tied together for the singular cause of democracy, freedom, opportunity, and to keep everyone who votes Democrat or simply leans left informed on all the issues that concern the state, and also keep people informed of the issues in the nation. We're all in this fight together, and our goal is to show a united front. We may not agree on all the issues, but we want to create a space where people will engage in good faith. I'm going to do the land acknowledge as well. The state of Michigan occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, Three Fires Confederacy, the Odawa, Ottawa, the Ojibwe, Chippewa, and the Potawatomi. The Michigan Democratic Party recognizes historic indigenous communities in Michigan and those who were forcibly removed from their homelands. We further recognize the ongoing relationship of dependence upon and respect for all living beings of earth, sky, and water. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm indigenous sovereignty, history, and experiences. So, once again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this really important meeting for us. But we're going to go into introductions. Just please say your name and where you're coming in from Michigan. My name's Alex Kirsch, and I live in Tuscola County. I am from Vassar. Joe?
Joe Gutowski, I'm the chair of the Rural Caucus. I'm from Lapeer County. I live in Hadley Township.
Thank you. April?
April Ozentoski from Huron County. I live in Bad Axe.
Excellent. Steve?
Steve Walker. I live in Southwest Detroit.
Excellent. Kathy, he tells where you're from.
She's muted.
Asked her to unmute.
I'm sorry. This
okay.
is Kathy. I'm from Adrian, Michigan, Lenawee County.
Thank you. And Richard, our guest of honor tonight.
Richard Douglas. I live in Iosco County in Tawas City.
Excellent. I drive through Tawas City all the time. I'll have to make deliveries up that way. So anyway, so getting right to it, okay? So first things first. The main reason I sent out this email is because I asked Joe Gutowski, who is to my right, if you could find anybody that could talk about rural healthcare issues. Richard Douglas is the name that he gave me. And he got me in contact with Richard. And then Richard has sent me a plethora of reading material to kind of go from. And I can honestly say, like I told Joe, it's like drinking water from a fire hose because healthcare is very complex. And there's a lot that Joe and I have talked about, and there was quite a bit that Richard and I talked about. But Richard, why don't you go ahead and just kind of like introduce yourself and explain why I brought you here today.
I'm not sure why you brought me here today, but I can cover everything else.
Yes, sir.
I'm a social epidemiologist. My career started in 1968 at CDC with the Public Health Service. I was assigned to the Chicago Board of Health after that. Then I went to graduate school at Michigan, got an MPH and a PhD in public health. Since then, I've had faculty appointments at Michigan and Wayne State at the medical school. And then I finally retired from Eastern Michigan University. I also teach and do research in West Africa. Most salient for tonight, though, is that my wife and I bought a summer place here in Tawas City in 2016, but we've been coming up here for years because we're sailors and kayakers. And when she died in 2020, just before the pandemic, I moved up here full time. I didn't want to live my life on the couch with Netflix, and I don't play golf. And so I found myself surrounded with Democrats who also didn't play golf and didn't want to live on Netflix. And we created an organization called the Rural Health Group. Really smart people. And I'm really lucky to have such a group hanging around. And we don't get paid for anything. But we started crunching numbers from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. All of us were retired. And we found some very disturbing things. Most specifically, if you take a horizontal across the state from Saginaw and then divide it north-south on I-75, the northeast corner of Michigan is a healthcare desert. And all of the public health statistics look bad. So we said, well, what's going on here? and we started digging in, one of the issues that we uncovered was the lack of access to care, because a lot of the care providers have evacuated northeastern Michigan. And now we find that that's true all over the state. It's been going on for about 40 years. The health systems consolidate, they close, they say, sorry, we're no longer available to you, which means the burden of access goes on the patients and the families in the form of transportation, non-emergency transportation. So, for instance, if you live in Sheboygan and you have a form of cancer that has 2 or 3 treatment options in the state of Michigan, both of them are in Detroit or Ann Arbor, and you have to go down for routine scans, you're talking about at least a 2-day trip, because if you've had anything to do with cancer, you know that the scans are never conclusive. They want you to come back again tomorrow. So now you're dealing with transportation costs. Well, a patient I know is married to a man who lost both of his great toes from diabetes. They're both over 80 years old. Her rare form of cancer requires scans, and each trip to Ann Arbor every month is worth $1,400. By the time you pay a driver, get rooms, meals, mileage, etc. Fortunately, in Sheboygan, she's got a group in Alpena called Friends Together, and they will cover a lot of the non-emergency medical transportation costs. But if you're not lucky enough to have cancer, then you're dealing with COPD or PTSD or any kind of cardiovascular disease or anything else that requires chronic maintenance. And if you don't have treatment available in your neighborhood, which is highly likely in rural Michigan, you're going to be doing a lot of traveling. And there are no organizations that scoop up all these other patients and get them to care at no cost. So I guess the good news is for this couple is that they had cancer to deal with. But she had cardiovascular problems, and none of her care was covered by Friends Together. So, and my point is, if the medical care system has essentially abandoned rural counties, which I believe is true, and they've done it for organizational efficiency reasons, which I understand, what is the obligation then of the healthcare system or the government or somebody to make sure patients can get to routine care? Otherwise, they will drop out of care, create an emergency situation. What could have been a $40 or $50 trip turns into a $4,000 or $5,000 emergency hospitalization, and frequently there's a bad medical outcome. So this is just one example of how fragile rural healthcare is in Michigan. And in the north and the Upper Peninsula, I mean, my God, this is the time of the year people go to the Porcupine Mountains to go hiking. I can tell you it's a very bad idea if you do that to fall and get a compound fracture, because there's only 15 inpatient beds between Houghton and Minnesota in the Upper Peninsula. 15 beds. Any small outbreak of anything, and those beds are full. So we walk into this crazy political year already with a very fragile system, with an aging population, with more and more chronic disease, more and more maintenance trips, non-emergency medical trips are going to be necessary. A year ago, Munson pulled its inpatient beds out of Gaylord and Grayling. So all those patients now have to go to Traverse City. A hospital closed in the western end of the UP last year. What the hell's going to happen to all the people that live in rural places when they're facing 3 or 4 hours to get to a reasonably functional hospital? And 40% at least of rural hospital income comes from Medicaid, which brings us, of course, to the big ugly bill that was passed last week. If there are serious cuts, the hospitals are already in trouble. We all know that. Everybody's talking about it. But what nobody's talking about that I've heard, except me and a couple others, is that the nursing homes are 78% dependent on Medicaid. And in our county, there are 4 nursing homes. And if they have a financial margin of 22%, they will not be able to stay alive if the Medicaid cuts take place. Their patients will have no place to go, so they'll be dumped into the hospitals, which will cost Medicaid 500% as much as it costs in the nursing home. So we're moving into a very wickedly ugly situation where we'll be able to do less care for fewer people with the same money. And then if the money is further slashed, we'll be doing less care with less money for fewer people. And if anybody sees anything bright and shiny or big or impressive about that, I think they're out of their minds.
Okay, so before we actually open it up more to the room and stuff, I just got a couple of questions. And when I open it up to the room, please be sure to raise your hand. If you need to figure out how to raise your hand, go to the react icon and look for the yellow hand and just click on that, and then I'll call you as soon as possible. So the first question I have, Richard, is that when I've asked this question before, I talked to the former head of the Rural Caucus, Mark Ludwig, and I also spoke to April Osatowski when she ran for office last year. What is the number one issue for rural voters? And that is healthcare, as you brought up. Because of this big BS bill that just got passed, right? We've already talked about how the transportation getting to and from hospitals is pretty much like virtually non-existent because like there's not enough out there. But how much more is this really going to hurt the rural communities, especially with so many rural voters that voted for Donald Trump? I mean, do they understand what they voted for? I mean, do they understand the impact, do you think?
Well, I don't think they understand that the healthcare system are the leading employers in every rural county. So not only are the patients and families going to be damaged by the big ugly bill, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs if the hospitals close or get smaller and the nursing homes close. Also, all the supplying organizations, the food services and maintenance companies, the people that mow the grass. I mean, you name it. In every community in the state of Michigan, including Detroit, the healthcare system is the lead employer. So if you're taking the principal or a chunk of the financing that supports the leading economic foundations of a community, you're dealing with a catastrophe at many, many levels. Not just healthcare. They're going to lose their jobs. They're not just losing healthcare, they're going to lose their jobs. And their neighbors are going to lose their jobs. And most of those are hourly positions. They might not lose their whole job. They might go down to 20 hours a week. But they're already just making it. So I think that the implications of slashing Medicaid, since we've become dependent on Medicaid in rural counties, needs to recognize that not only is it just the healthcare delivery that counts, it's the economic foundations that the healthcare system provides. And that will be hit hard.
You and I the other day also spoke about like the nursing homes. We really touched a lot about nursing homes. You talk about 78% of Medicaid goes towards nursing homes, essentially. But if these nursing homes close down, you brought up the fact that
that's not what I said. I said 78% of the revenues
okay,
in nursing homes come from Medicaid.
My mistake then. But should they actually take a hit and the nursing homes can no longer provide care, they end up having to go to the hospitals. But if the hospitals can't provide, if the nursing home patients are lucky enough, they might have a family, but then the family ends up having to be caretakers. And what if they work full-time jobs? Then they got to quit those jobs. It's a drastic impact that's going to affect entire communities.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And that should be a concern for everybody because there's many of us that have, elderly relatives, and a lot of us aren't certified caregivers. There are people that actually go to school for stuff like this, and this is going to hurt many people, and I don't think they realize this. The one thing that the other side likes to talk about is the fact that this is not going to affect able-bodied. It's not going to affect people that need Medicaid, but based upon what I'm understanding, they're talking about 17 million people getting ripped off of Medicaid. And they like to say, oh, well, we just want to make sure that people aren't taking advantage of the system. What people do you think they're talking about?
But that's a bullshit Ronald Reagan argument.
I know.
First of all, if anybody's ever applied for Medicaid and you're an able-bodied, healthy young man, you're not going to get on Medicaid. You're just not going to do it. It's too hard. You're not eligible. Mm. The proportion of people who are on Medicaid who are working, if they're not disabled or elderly and frail, is almost 100%. But of course, they're working at minimum wage jobs. And if they're forced to get another minimum wage job and they've got a couple kids at home, they're going to spend everything they earn on childcare, if they can find childcare. So all of these very major issues are interrelated. One of the about 8 months ago now, I was in Lansing, and a representative from the Republican Party took my elbow and said, "Why are you doing this research on non-emergency medical transportation? And why are you criticizing Medicaid? Everybody knows that there's no demand for Medicaid on non-emergency medical transportation." Well, we were in the hall, and I said, "Do you want me to embarrass you here, or do you want to go to your office and you can give me a cup of coffee and I'll embarrass you there?" So he smiled, and we went to his office. And I sat down. He got me a nice cup of coffee. And I said, "Have you ever been on Medicaid?" And he looked like I had insulted him. Like, "Oh, for God's sake, no." I said, "Well, I didn't think so." So Medicaid, non-emergency medical transportation, is based on reimbursement. And if you're eligible for Medicaid, you've got, what, $4,000 or something in the bank, and you can have a house and one car, but you don't have a lot of disposable income. And suppose you have to have a couple trips for medical care, and you're a good citizen, so you write a check for $900. So now you're down to maybe $2,100 in the bank for the rest of the month, and it's the second week of the month, and you got other bills to pay, you got a car payment, maybe a rent payment. And then the hospital calls and said, "Well, we need you to come back next week." Well, it takes 6 to 8 weeks for Medicaid to get you reimbursed. And now you're going to add another $1,400 or $900 because you're a good citizen. You're going to empty your entire paycheck and your entire checking account because you're a good citizen. You pay your bills. The point I make was you can't afford to participate if it's reimbursable on Medicaid. Medicaid recipients don't have enough residual income or disposable income to participate that way. And when the Medicaid office tries to get you a ride, they never promise. In this county, they say, "We'll try to get you a ride, but you have to try 10 days before the appointment." The day of the appointment arrives, they couldn't get you a ride because there are no vendors. Then they say, "Sorry, we couldn't get you a ride, but we tried." So that appointment is not kept. So the provider loses, say it was a lab test, they lose the reagents they had set out for the patient coming in. They're taking a hit on personnel and materials because the patient couldn't get there. Medicaid is a colossal failure in 80 out of 83 counties in Michigan. The Auditor General did a report 3 years ago and found that in all rural counties in Michigan, the Medicaid NEMT program was a joke. It wasn't serving anybody. And nationally, only 4% of Medicaid patients ever use it because it doesn't work. So we have this assumption in healthcare that the patients will get here. You know, the biggest challenge is getting to the parking lot. They can't do it. And if they can't do it, then they get dropped out of care, or they stop going because they're embarrassed, or they get late appearance fees and rescheduling fees that they can't afford. And so if we don't take care of these boring issues of getting patients from home to medical care, there are ripple effects in the economy, to the providers, to the whole community, just like you mentioned. And people that don't see it in that holistic way miss the whole point. The whole point. And the whole point is this is a very significant part of our economy. And this idiotic legislation is not only cruel, it is economically stupid.
I agree. I'm going to go ahead and get ready to open it up. The only thing I'd really have to say, and I talked with you about this, and I talked with Joe about this, if there's any issue that the Democrats need to get behind, it's us talking about how they are going after healthcare. Like, this needs to be our unifying message, because 2024, the Republicans used a lot of rhetoric to get that guy back into office. We just need to be just as tenacious and talk about like the effects of this. And I think, like you and I said, we need to break it down into a clear and concise manner that gets people to understand. So if you were to make it clear and concise for people to kind of comprehend it, like what would be like the bullet points you would use to get people's attention? Because that's what gets people talking about it.
Trump lied. He said Medicaid wouldn't be cut. It's being cut. He wants to take Medicaid money and give it to his friends as tax credits. And you will suffer to put more money in their pockets.
Excellent. So the first question I have right here is from Kathy Burr. Kathy, you want to go ahead and ask this question, or do you want me to just read it for you? I can do either.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time unmuting.
It's
So
okay.
I think my original question was, is there a trend in the state of Michigan concerning profit hospitals to nonprofit hospitals? And if so, how were they gauged within that 40-year decline that was mentioned with the rural hospitals closing? Thank you.
Large medical corporations, if they're legally listed as nonprofit, is really sort of a play on words. Everybody knows if you don't have a margin, you don't have a mission. But a really good example of what's happened is why Ascension Systems, based in St. Louis, Missouri, have finally left Michigan. They couldn't make enough money. The hospital here in Tawas City was sold to My Michigan, thank goodness. But Ascension, for instance, had a helicopter that they owned. And they had a hospital, a bigger hospital, St. Mary's in Saginaw. So I would have 5 or 6 times a day this helicopter taking round trips from Tawas City to Saginaw, because that was more profitable than putting a cardiologist in Tawas City.
Wow.
Now that My Michigan is here, I haven't heard a helicopter over my house in 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, the quote from the Ascension CEO a couple years ago in the New York Times was his mission was more patients and fewer staff. And he meant it. Now that's technically a nonprofit corporation. That just means they can pay their CEO whatever they want and they don't pay taxes or the same taxes.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the financing departments in these hospital systems are very powerful. And they are calling the shots on volume of care, the volume of high-end, well-insured care.
Mm.
And they know very precisely what the patient populations look like. If a community in Michigan wants to succeed in a rural place, it needs to figure out how to recruit, as a retirement destination, lots of people with platinum insurance. They will do very, very well. But if we lose our hospital because of Medicaid cuts here in Iosco County, this will never be a retirement destination. They will go to Harbor Springs or Alpena or Traverse City, but they will not come here because it's a 4-hour drive to the medical care you might need. And that's too much of a risk if you're in retirement.
Right.
So all of these things are obviously very interconnected. Also, the big elephant in the room is the pharmaceutical industry.
Yes.
And a huge amount of what I consider excess cost that Medicaid pays goes to pharmaceuticals. And the more chronic disease you get, the more pharmaceuticals you have to buy. And if you look at the demographic profile in rural Michigan, you're looking at a chronic disease bonanza for the pharmaceutical industry.
Well, when it comes down to that, I'm glad you brought the pharmaceutical industry, because last year, one of the big topics I talked about with Clint St. Mosley, who ran for the 9th Congressional District, because he works in insurance. We talked about PBMs. And for those not aware, PBMs are pharmacy benefit managers. They're basically the middlemen between your insurance company and the medication that you need. There are 3 companies that take up 80% of PBMs. One of them is CVS. And what they talked about last year, especially at the White House, was the fact that if there's no PBM reform, 34% of independent pharmacies across the country are going to close. Now,
Right.
And people think that's not big. I looked it up. That's like
Yeah.
that's like 14,000 pharmacies across the country. That's an insane number, especially for rural communities, because independent pharmacies, and I'll try to be really quick about this. Independent pharmacies actually have to spend more in order to get the medication they need to give to their recipients, especially to their patient or to their customers in the rural areas. CVS can move in and they can charge as low as they possibly can and drive that person out of business, and then they have no competition, so they can just jack that price back up. And
Well, here's a case study that might challenge what you just said.
Okay.
Here in Tawas City, we had a Rite Aid, and we had a independent pharmacy.
Yep.
Rite Aid closed all their stores. Not only did the independent pharmacy triple their business, the prices went down. Everybody in town's happy.
Okay.
So it isn't necessarily true that the profit margin is the only thing that's going to drive these independents into pricing themselves out of business. In fact, if the large chain pharmacies close down like Rite Aid did, it might be a good time for the independents, and we'll see what happens. But at least in Iosco County, we had a good outcome when the chain closed and the independent took over the whole business. Rite Aid was going to refer me to their next available store in West Branch, which is 45 minutes to an hour away.
That's a hike.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think Rite Aid was ever part of the PBMs, though, because like CVS is definitely one of them. They're one of the 3 companies. I can't remember the other 2. I'd have to look it up real quick. So, but was there anybody else that wanted to ask a question of Richard real quick? Okay, so one of them.
Kathy's got another question in
go ahead.
the chat about the ACA.
Okay. Said I worked for MDHHS since 2004. 40% more clients have medical insurance since ACA became law. I thought that was feeding a growing medical system throughout the state.
It's true. And the Affordable Care Act cut medical indigence by 50%. It didn't eliminate it, but also the Affordable Care Act was a bonanza for the private health insurance industry. That's another discussion. I think actually the current legislation is a backdoor effect to attack the AC from the back door. They couldn't succeed with 50 tries in court under Trump's first administration. Those cases, by the way, cost just the congressional hearings alone cost over $3.5 million of our money, and they were all failed, and they were all charades. But the Affordable Care Act is fairly safe right now. But a lot of the expansion into Medicaid that the Affordable Care Act facilitated is now being challenged under this new bill. And curiously, or not curiously, cleverly, the Republicans have delayed the impacts of the Medicaid cuts until after the midterm elections.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
So they can safely say nobody's lost any Medicaid benefits yet until after 2017 when it all hits hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Steve, what you got?
Yeah, I'm curious if the governor has any effort or program to try to deal with these rural health issues.
I don't know. I'm on the State Advisory Council on Aging, and we're advisory to the State Commission on Aging. And I know we've been providing a lot of information for the last 2 years on the situation in rural Michigan. I have not been aware of any specific legislation designed exclusively for rural communities. But I can tell you that if these cuts start hitting hard, there's going to have to be specific legislation dealing with rural communities, or we're going to lose 2 or 3 more hospitals.
Again, you get the impression the Democratic Party sort of blows off rural areas. Does that seem to be the case with our governor?
I don't know. I won't speak for the governor, but I can tell you if you're running for office in a rural county, it's hard to get any money from anywhere else to help you run your campaign except your own neighbors. It's very frustrating. And yes, we do. In northeastern Michigan, I can tell you we frequently feel ignored by the state party. And Joe knows this and knows how I feel about this. And that's why his leadership is so very, very important. The rural caucus of the Michigan Democratic Party and the senior caucus of the Michigan Democratic Party together have thousands of individuals participating in monthly meetings. The senior caucus has over 600 members. But here's a ray of hope. In Iosco County, we have now over 400 card-carrying Democrats in this county. That's astonishing because 7 years ago we had 39.
Wow.
And I know that there are Democrats and fed up people that are sick and tired of what's been going on in rural places that need a way to let their anxieties and their energy go to work. And we've found a formula here by having a full-time office right on Newman Street, right next to the Chamber of Commerce. Like it or not, we're going to have events every single week. And on No King's Day in this county alone, we had 600 people participating in demonstrations.
Awesome.
So I think people are pissed off. They need to be organized. They need to know what to say. And if you're talking about issues that count, it's going to be jobs and healthcare. And jobs and healthcare are not independent.
Great.
Yeah, I'm actually a member of the senior caucus. The governor wants to run for president. I've talked to her about it. But you don't think she fully realizes what the issues are out in these rural areas?
I don't know. I won't. I can't speak for her.
Go ahead, Kathy. What you got?
Okay, so I thought it was really interesting the point that he just made about the pharmacies closing down. And I know that there's a big push all over, all different companies to do this mail pharmacy.
Yeah.
And I just think it's like, oh well, it's cheaper, and so really you can still get your meds like that. But then there's some people that they don't have reliable. I'm sorry, but the United States Post Office has not been reliable.
Well, but
I just
but your point is very, very important because pharmacists do more than just pass out drugs.
right.
during COVID, the pharmacies took over vaccination efforts. And the successful vaccination rates rested on the pharmacies going to work.
Mhm.
Pharmacists can ask questions about bad medical reactions to drugs and come up with alternatives. And the pharmacist, as an information source, doesn't happen through mail order drugs.
Right. But then again, there's teledoctor.
If you have
If you have
broadband,
internet, if you have a computer, yeah, this is stipulated.
What you got, Joe?
So,
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Kathy. My apologies.
okay,
Go
so
ahead.
then my final question was about I'll let you go on. I'll let someone else talk and
No, it's
I'll
okay.
come back to it. No, thanks.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're asking good questions, Kathy. Go ahead if you want. I'm fine.
Actually, I forgot the question.
Oh, okay.
It'll come to you.
I'm 61.
scratch the back of your head. I'm 79.
Yeah.
What you got, Joe?
And I'm
God
stuck in
bless.
between. I'm 70.
Oh,
You're a
Richard,
kid.
first of all, I wondered if you would take a moment. You're one of the smartest men I know, but you're also very modest. Can you talk about your book a little bit?
Sure. I had when I moved up here in 2020 and we had COVID going on, I discovered that all of the Democrats that came to meetings didn't know anything about the history of the healthcare system. They all talked about it, but they didn't know how it happened. And I've been teaching it for a long, long, long time. And my deceased wife, Marion, always tried to get me to write it up as a book. So Gloria Brooks, who was the editor of our newsletter, asked me if I'd put together columns. And every month, the newsletter came out for about 2 years with how did we get into this mess? Where did this healthcare system come from? How did this crazy accident in history happen? What are its strengths? What are its weaknesses? So fast forward a couple of years, I'm on a Amtrak train coming back from doing museums in Chicago to Ann Arbor, and I get an email from a publisher in London saying, I'm in receipt of several of your columns on the evolution of the U.S. healthcare system. Would you like to weave these into a book? I said, where were you when I was chasing tenure? By the time I got to Ann Arbor, I had a contract. The book starts in about 1949, and it traces the evolution of the post-World War II healthcare system that we know today. All of the major political and economic impacts. And I don't take any prisoners. I point out, for instance, that the Clinton healthcare plan, which gave us managed care, was recognized by Republican businessmen as way too profitable to be sitting in the bureaucracy and the federal government. So they butchered the Clinton healthcare plan and created a new industry called managed care. And it was a huge, huge profit maker for the private health industry. It did reduce healthcare inflation, because that's exactly what the Clinton plan was supposed to do. But it backfired because it became highly profitable. Another example is in the book is George W. Bush's Part D Medicare plan, which was sitting on his desk the day he walked into the White House, written by the pharmaceutical industry. We're the only country in the world that gives a blank check to the pharmaceutical industry to name their own prices. It's insane. My wife had a drug in her cancer treatment called Tagresso. It was a targeted therapy. It was $240 per pill per day for life. We're talking about $24,000 a year. A month. $24,000 a month. So I have a friend who was a pharmacist at the University of Windsor in Ontario. And there was a good Vietnamese restaurant across the street. So we went and had dinner with him. And we started talking about this drug that my wife was taking. And I said, well, what does it cost here? He said, I don't know. Let's go find out. So we walked across the street and saw one of his former students working as a pharmacist. The same drug with the same dose in Ontario for an Ontario resident was $1,600 per month with no copay. My wife had a $600 monthly copay. Well, that's all Part D Medicare. If the same drug is worth 30 times as much in Michigan as it is in Ontario, there's something really wrong.
Yeah.
Well, that's how Part D Medicare was passed. It was passed to be a fat cat profit maker for the drug industry.
Well, you just answered my second question without even knowing I was going to ask it. I remember the night that you went with me to Carrie Reingan's first town hall regarding her My Care legislation.
At the library in Ypsilanti.
Yes, and she saw you, flipped the book over she was holding, pointed at your picture and said, "This is you." She was reading your book. A lot of legislators have. And I remember she asked you to speak, and you spoke regarding your wife and the issue of Canadian drugs being much less expensive. And for the record, I have started buying drugs from a mail order Canadian pharmacy, and it's unbelievable how much less they cost.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow.
I'm talking, there's, I forget what it is. I'm no medical expert, but it's for my wife's fungus on her feet. She has an extreme case, and it's a prescription, and her doctor prescribed it, sent it in, and when she called to pick it up, they said, "Well, before you come in, we want you to know that it's $2,400." And so I called the pharmacy in Canada, and it was $179.
Exactly. And that's and why doesn't, if you're looking for waste, if that's what Musk was looking for, there it is.
Yeah.
But if it's going to their friends, they don't call it waste.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. What you got, Kathy?
All right, so I remember my question. And so I was going with the logic that, rural healthcare systems are either not available or they're on the decline or, in that process. And a lot of these rural counties are agricultural. Now, I'm from Lenawee, and we grow the most corn and soybeans of any county in the Michigan. That's what we say anyway. And we're so red here. And but we have, a good college nearby. One just closed. State Heights University, tragic. And we've got one ProMedica hospital. Now, we still have plenty of really good doctors and everything here. And so in Illinois County, everybody's able to come here. But I see that not all agricultural counties are Republican. Has anybody looked into the demographics? And like, Trump lied to these people.
Well,
And
and
he
they
said,
and they don't.
yeah, and
But
they said,
I don't even think they hear the lies. I think they walk into. They don't listen to the news. They listen to Fox
yeah,
all day long. They don't question anything that comes across on Fox. They are told not to trust anybody else, so they don't trust anybody else.
so
And they walk into the polling place, push
Yeah.
R, and walk out.
yeah, well, I don't understand that because it's like, and so they just think that Trump was going to fix that.
It's not.
I mean, the reason is I want to start talking to people in Lenawee County. I'm trying to I love this county to go blue. I'm working with a Lenawee Indivisible group and things like that, and we're just, they're non-party, but we're just trying to reach out to people. Anyway, and they're still trying to think, how do we reach out to these people? I mean, how do we do it?
One by one. I think it's the only way it works.
Okay. So
I,
thanks.
I, oh,
Thanks for your
Ca-
insight.
oh, Kathy, I'd like to give you an answer to your question.
Yes.
There's 83 counties in Michigan. Trump won 65 of them last election. That's 18 that went for the Democrat. Okay. Of those 18, 6 are rural and 12. Well, you know what? 2 are a toss up. So let's say 10 are urban and 18 are 8 are rural of the 18. And the 65 that went for Trump were all considered, based on demographics, rural.
One of the things I'd like to add to the conversation is that rural has to be paired with the word isolation. The more distant and isolated you are from a metropolitan area, the more difficult you are to reach. And that provides a huge problem for, well, like here in Congressional District 1, Jack Bergman, he maintains his Republican base even though he doesn't even attend his own fundraiser last month here in Iosco County. I mean, they think he's just their guy because he's been their guy, and then that's all they need to know. We need to figure out how to make our neighbors more thoughtful about the process, but they don't trust the process and they don't like it. They don't know. They avoid conversations. They don't talk about religion or politics, right? And this is about politics. And frankly, some of the religion that I hear coming out of the White House is not religion at all. It's like I saw a Christmas card from somebody in Kentucky last year where his whole family, a guy running for office, and he had his little family lined up in front of the Christmas tree, and they all had an AR-15.
Oh, jeez.
Well, tell me what the AR-15 has to do with the new covenant.
Nothing whatsoever.
So if that's the mentality, and if the evangelical movement has moved into more of a political party than a religion, which I think is true, and a lot of people are writing about this, you can't talk about the goodness of getting rid of immigrants or getting rid of refugees
Exactly.
and claim that you're a Christian. That's not going to work. You're a political pawn.
One thing
go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe. It's fine.
I still have my hand up. I didn't lower it, but
it's okay.
That was an accident, so I did interrupt. I apologize. But the overriding issue that I deal with, because I'm also a registered lobbyist, along with being the chair of the Rural Caucus, I lobby pro bono for the Rural Caucus and for the Democratic Party. Local control. Republicans use the term local control endlessly to reaffirm with their base the need to vote Republican. They claim that, for example, when Democrats in the 102nd legislature were able to pass legislation, renewable energy legislation, wind and solar, I had to write letters to the editor, put out papers to argue with the Republican legislators who were telling their base that Democrats took away local control. We didn't do that at all.
Nope.
And I mean, they lie. It isn't just out of Washington. It's in Michigan, and people buy it. If it's coming from a Republican, they buy it. And local control, right now, they have people so twisted up. Oh, the Democrats, if a Democrat wins, he's going to take away your local control. Your zoning board won't have any power. Your county board, your township boards won't have any power. They'll take all that away and give it to the Michigan Public Service Commission. You know, I fight the battle. I speak all the time, truth to power, trying to convince people that it's a lie. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
It's okay. It's not a problem. Like this is a lot of really good information, but I'm gonna get a little personally myself actually because in 2022, I think it was in 2022. Anyway, doesn't matter. I had a severe neck pain, basically, right? It was like right here, but I was also feeling some chest pain. So I drove all the way down to Clio to an urgent care clinic. They ran a few tests, and then after the tests, I said, I'm feeling a little bit of chest pain. So they recommended I go to the nearest emergency room. That's in Flint. Flint is an hour's drive away from me. Now, I'm lucky because, like, that's only an hour's drive. But, like you mentioned earlier, Richard, there are people that have to drive hours, even for, like, for some people for, like, non emergency care.
If you were
Now,
having a heart attack, you would have been dead.
well, I know. But I was even just saying chest pains of some sort. I couldn't explain it, though. But, like, there are people that, don't have access to emergency room care. Well, anyway, long story short, I get to the McLaren Hospital in Flint, and my wife and I sat there for almost 8 hours. I didn't see one doctor, and I basically had a bunch of nurses, which they were severely understaffed there, which is something that really needs to be addressed as well. They're overworked, understaffed, and some of them were very short tempered, but I think it's just because they've been worked so much. But like, there were people that were sitting there in that emergency room for hours, the same amount of time. People were like literally either vomiting or they were bleeding on the floor and stuff like that. My bill was like almost $4,000. Fortunately, because I have TRICARE, I was okay. But I think about the people that were not so fortunate, that don't have coverage, they don't have Medicare. And I continue to say, like, healthcare is a human right. There should not be a for-profit healthcare system. So and healthcare is something that we can all stand behind. But the question is, it's all about the messaging. So, what kind of messaging could we push forth? Because as an issue that can actually bring more moderate people to our side, would you say? And it's kind of a long question, so I'm sorry.
That's a pretty large question.
I'm sorry.
I honestly don't think we can click and get a nonprofit public healthcare system that would work in this country right away for so many reasons. 15% of the healthcare dollar goes to financial intermediaries. Well, that means 15% of the whole economy in healthcare are jobs that have nothing to do with healthcare. They're just processing payments. And we have so many of these parasite industries, like the accreditation of hospitals is another one. And these parasitic industries have powerful people in their court. So changing the system is going to have to be very, very difficult, but it has to happen. But what is also true is that the aging of the population and the flat economy of a lot of elderly people means that Medicaid is going to become more and more critical for the elderly population. The proportion of elderly who are eligible for both Medicare and Medicaid is going up rapidly as people live longer, and then they use up all their resources, and then they become impoverished 85-year-olds. And we have to recognize this is our lot. The good news is we're living longer. The bad news is it's not cheap. And do we put the burden of paying for it on the individual, or do we reward them for living a good life and help them out? We have to put it in a context, that does not look like charity, but looks like a reward.
Thank you so much. Anyway, I promised it was going to be an hour, and it's been close to an hour. What you got, Joe? I'm sorry.
Real quick, Richard, you remember working with me, at least giving me advice on this. 2 years ago, when nurses approached Kerry and there was legislation initiated to require that hospitals assign one nurse to each ICU patient.
Yeah.
Because nurses gave testimony in the state legislature that on some nights, one nurse was trying to take care of 7 ICU patients.
That's right.
And I could not believe.
That was Sparrow in Lansing, wasn't it?
Yes, and I could not believe the push from all the hospitals and how much money they spent on high-priced lobbyists and sent them to the Michigan legislature to beat down that legislation.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And Alex just asked, what can we do? Those are the kind of things that people need to hear about. That, hey, not only is your healthcare system corrupt, but these people will do anything they can to save a dime at the expense of somebody's life.
I've got a campaign button that says your money and your life.
Mm-hmm. There's one for you, Alex.
Yeah. What was it again? It was like your money and your life?
Like you're being held up. Your money and your life.
Yeah.
Or your life, right?
No, and.
Okay.
And adding them together, basically.
All right.
I'm taking your money even if the outcome isn't very good.
Because we spend more on healthcare than any other first world nation, but yet when it comes compared to other first world nations, our healthcare is terrible. It's awful.
Mhm.
And
Well,
you'll always hear people say, "Oh, well, what about the people that fly into the country to get healthcare?" Yeah, because they can afford it. That's the difference. The average American citizen cannot afford the same quality care. Like there are people that get for surgeries done, but then they're just smacked with this bill and they're like, I probably should have just died. It probably would have been better for my family. And nobody in this country should ever have to think about that. Like that is literally like the most heartbreaking thing you could possibly think of.
Well, I'm going to have a knee replacement in 2 weeks. And I have platinum insurance, and I'm glad. But I'm going to have to sign off because I've got another call coming in from the West Coast.
Richard, thank you so much for your time. And thank you so much, Joe, for recommending him. And I just want to thank everybody for taking part in this meeting because this is like information that really needs to be put out. And I'm so glad for everybody's questions.
Alex, anybody on this call can get my email address.
Excellent. I'll be sure.
Please send it out.
And if I don't talk to you, Richard, good luck with the knee.
Yes, best of luck.
Sure you'll do well.
We'll be in contact as well, Richard, because I want to talk to you more about this stuff because
how can I kick political ass if I don't have a good knee?
That's
there you
right.
go. There you go. All
Thanks.
right. Well, I hope everybody has a great evening, and I'll let everybody know when the next meeting is going to be. It'll probably be the second Tuesday of August. But anyway, thank you all so much for tuning in tonight, and I hope everyone has a great evening. And remember, progress means forward. We are not going back. Take care.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Take care.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.